Hello Year 9, welcome back to your next living room lessons. We are continuing our leisure topic, and so far we've had a look at what I mean by leisure, different types of leisure, what kind of leisure you might take part in, and we've had a look at leisure in urban areas. We've had a look at some of the different leisure activities you can do in Brighton, and we're going to have a look at the flip side of that now and have a look at leisure in rural areas for the next few lessons actually. So what you are going to need today is your book, a pen and a ruler, your phone, and there are two worksheets that will make your life a lot easier on this. So there's the honeypot site sheet and the footpath erosion sheet. If you're able to print these out before we start, that will make it easier and stop you having to do so much drawing, which I'm sure you all love anyway. So before we get started, here are our Geog memory questions for this lesson. So in a minute, pause your videos, scan the QR code or go to the link and have a go at answering these three questions, and please put your name so we know who you are. Okay, so as I said, today we're going to be having a look at what leisure is like in a rural area. So title in your books today is Leisure in Rural Areas. Please can, I said rural really strangely then, sorry. Please can you all write this into your books and underline it with a ruler. And then I just want you to have a think about this little question down here. So what activities do you think people might enjoy in a rural area? And we will come on to that now. So what I would like you to do in your books is just write me a quick list of different types of leisure activities that you think people are more likely to take part in if they were in a rural area compared to if they were in an urban area. So there are 5 on the board already for you. What I would like you to do is write a list of those 5, and then I want you to try and come up with 2 more different things that you can do in a rural area. So the 5 we've got here, we've obviously got hiking, horse riding, water sports, rock climbing, cycling, other things you might have, paintballing, fishing, I don't know, lots of things. You all live in rural areas, I'm sure you've got loads. So in terms of these different leisure activities, what I want you to think about first of all is if you were, say, to compare these leisure activities to the kind of stuff we were looking at in urban areas, so things like restaurants or going to the theatre, going to cafes, going shopping, how do you think that maybe those activities that you take part in a rural area are probably better for a person's health compared to the ones that you might do in an urban area? And then I want you to have a think about this second question. What activities can you do in both? So pause your videos and answer these 2 questions in full sentences. Okay, so the things that you can generally say about activities in rural areas are they're generally a bit more active. They're generally activities that are probably going to be a little bit better for your health because you're outside, you're being active, whereas if the more of the leisure activities you do in an urban area are more sat down eating, sat down drinking, sat down watching a show. Shopping, I suppose you're being active. Some of you are very active, I'm sure. So generally we would say that leisure activities you take part in rural areas are more they're better for your health in terms of you're being more active. In terms of activities you can do in both, obviously there's quite a few different bits and pieces. Things like churches and religious buildings, you tend to have those in both, same as pubs, you tend to have pubs in both, play parks you probably have a bit of in both. So there are some things you can do in both, but in terms of the scope of how you can do them in rural areas, you can do them much longer and much better. In terms of going for a walk, obviously lockdown has shown me about this because I live in a city and all I have to walk around is Preston Park, which you know I love Preston Park, but it's the same walk. It's not very long. It takes me about 25 minutes, half an hour to do a lap round it with a little bit of a slow meander. Whereas if I go to a rural area, you can walk for hours and hours and hours. So there are a lot of differences between these activities in your rural and your urban areas. So when we talk about places that are really kind of popular leisure sites, we call these a honeypot site. And a honeypot site is a key term you're going to write down, but it's a physical or a human feature that attracts a large number of visitors. So a particular site, a place where lots of people flock to. So it could be somewhere physical like Durdle Door in Dorset, really popular stretch of coastline, loads and loads of tourists in that area. Or it could be a little quaint village like this one in the Yorkshire Dales somewhere that attracts lots of people. Or it could be somewhere more kind of in an urban area. We do get honeypot sites in urban areas as well. So what I would like you to do next is answer these 3 questions in your books in full sentences. So why do some areas become honeypots? So why do you think certain areas might attract a large amount of people? Name a honeypot site in a rural area that's I want you to think of somewhere quite local to us. I want you to think of somewhere near to us that attracts a large amount of people. And then name an example of a local honeypot site. Oh, I've messed that up. So I want you to do in a rural and an urban area. These questions are confusing. Name a honeypot site in a rural and urban area. Name an example of a local honeypot site. There we go. So a rural and an urban area doesn't have to be a local one, but you can think of a local one. And then I want you to think of a local honeypot site. So I've probably confused the hell out of you there. Answer this first question. Why do you think a place might become a honeypot site? And then just give me 3 examples of honeypot sites. Probably local ones, but I want you to make sure at least you have at least 1 urban and 1 rural. Okay, so in terms of why areas become honeypot sites, it could be that somewhere's outstandingly beautiful, really pretty, lots of kind of amazing landforms, rock formations. It could be that it's been made famous by a TV show or by a film. For example, I mentioned villages in the Yorkshire Dales. I'm not sure if this is that one, but there's a village up in the Yorkshire Dales that has become a honeypot site because it's where Emmerdale is filmed. So it could be due to being on TV or film, or it could be because somewhere's free. Somewhere that's free is going to attract more people to it. So there's a range of different reasons why places might become a honeypot site. So in terms of rural and urban ones in our local area, if we're talking about rural, we've obviously got Jack and Jill Windmill, we've got Seven Sisters Country Park, we've got the Downs in general. And urban areas, we've got the pier, we've got the beach, Brighton Pavilion. All of these are things that attract a lot of people to them, and they all have something in common that makes them a little bit kind of special. So if we're thinking about the pier, obviously the pier has a lot of entertainment there, so people go there for that. If we're talking about the pavilion, historical. Because it's such a historically important place, it's become a honeypot site. And Ditchling Beacon and Jack and Jill Windmill, they're obviously beautiful spots to sit and look at some amazing countryside. So honeypot sites are a really kind of key term, and hopefully you all wrote that key term down for me as well. So in terms of what makes a rural honeypot site, the 3 kind of main things that make somewhere a popular honeypot site are they are exceptionally beautiful, so they're somewhere that's outstandingly different and pretty, they're interesting, and that they're accessible by road. It's important, because they're rural, that it is somewhere you can drive to and you can park at, and that people can actually go and visit it. So the majority of our UK natural honeypot sites are either in an area of outstanding natural beauty, or they're in a national park, and we will come back to what those 2 different words mean in a moment. So what I want you to have a go at now is a skills question. So this question was on the exam paper a few years ago, and what it is students collected data about visitors to honeypot sites. Their results are shown in table 2.5 and graph 2.6 below. Complete graph 2.6 by plotting the results of visitors G. So what we've got on this is we've got 2 kind of different approaches that you need to follow on this. So not only do we know the distance that the person travelled, but we also know the direction that they travelled. So what you need to do is put person G on there. So you need to first of all draw your arrow in the right direction, for whether it's north, east, south or west, and then you need to put it in the right distance. So these concentric rings have got different kilometres on. You need to work out which part of the ring they fall into. So this is on a sheet for you. So if you're able to print this sheet out, have a go at this. If you weren't able to print the sheet out, it's quite hard for you to have a go at this. There's a lot of drawing involved there, so don't worry about it. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go at that, and your arrow should look something like this red one here, because we know that person G is travelling from the east, so our arrow is going to go to the east, and we know that they have travelled 12.5 kilometres, so they're going to be exactly halfway between 10 kilometres and 15 kilometres. So our arrow is going to the east, and it's 12.5 kilometres long. So obviously these honeypot sites, which attract a large amount of people, there are going to be problems created at them as well. And when we talk about how much damage a site can take, because obviously Tourists, we're pretty sloppy, we're pretty lazy. I mean, I try not to be, but I'm sure lots of people are. And they cause damage, they cause problems in these honeypot sites. So what we call this is the carrying capacity. And the carrying capacity is the ability of a place to absorb the activity of people without there being any lasting damage. So the greater the carrying capacity, the higher the chances are of that place not looking damaged. But if somewhere's got quite a low carrying capacity, it's not going to take many visitors for that place to look a little bit naff and a little bit run down. So what I'd like to do next is pause videos, copy out this key term, and I want you to have a go at these 2 questions. So I want you to write down 5 ways that visitors might cause problems at honeypot sites. So how might visitors damage these places? And then I want you to think of some ways that we as humans have tried to manage this. So if it's in a national park, for example, there will be a team of people whose job it is to protect these sites and come up with new strategies. So have a go at these 2 questions in your books for me. They can just be bullet point lists on this one. Okay, we're not going to go through the answers on these because we're actually going to cover them over the next few activities. So the first thing I would like to do, on the board I've got 4 different problems that have been created in rural kind of honeypot sites. And what I'd like to do is, on the left you have got the problem, and on the right you've got the kind of explanation, the impact that that has. So I'd like you to make a copy of these different boxes, and I want you to match them up so that you've got the problem matched up to the explanation. So pause videos now and have a go at that. Okay, so as you can see, the first one is already done for you. So if there are lots of visitors, it does mean there's going to be lots of money coming into the area, but most of the visitors will come by cars, which mean that there's noisy roads, there's traffic jams, and there's an increase in air pollution. What have I done? Visitors want freedom to roam. Sorry, that arrow should have gone there. I should have checked that. Visitors want freedom to roam, but they wear away the footpaths and they disturb wildlife. People buy second homes here, but this pushes the house prices up for other people. So lots of the wealthy people in Britain will buy second homes in some of these amazing places. So down in Devon and Cornwall and on the south coast or up in the Lake District, rich people go and buy a holiday home there. But that then makes the house prices more expensive in that place, which means it's harder for the locals to actually buy a house. And new businesses end up setting up. If there's lots of honeypot sites, if it attracts a lot of visitors, people are going to set up new businesses. But often these places, because of the great British weather, are quite seasonal. So we might have high amounts of visitors in the summer, and then in winter they have no one. So it becomes really difficult to operate a successful business. So one of the issues I mentioned there is something called footpath erosion. Now I have to tell you now, and Miss Childs always shouts at me for this, I find this the most boring thing we do in the whole of the geography GCSE. So we're going to skate over it quite quickly. It is important, but it's not particularly interesting. So footpath erosion is, you will have all seen this a million times, but not really clicked what it is say there is a large grass field. And people generally always take the same route across that field, and they might walk diagonally across that field. And what you then start to have is a kind of natural footpath forming. So it's not been created, it's not got tarmac down, it's not been built on purpose. But what you find, if people always take the same route, they wear down the grass and you get this kind of footpath forming. And this is what we call footpath erosion. So what I would like you to do next, hopefully if you've been able to print out the sheet, you've got this, but there are 4 diagrams here of the 4 different steps in footpath erosion. And on the board are the 4 different definitions. So if you've got the sheet, you'll have the pictures, and then I just want you in the boxes underneath to write out the 4 different steps. If you haven't got the sheet, unfortunately, you're gonna have to make a quick copy of these pictures for me, okay? So pause your videos and have a go at that now. Okay, so here are our answers. So at the beginning, there is good vegetation cover, the roots and the particles are binded together really well. So you've got a field full of grass, the grass is growing well, the roots are firm, everything's good. And then as people start to trample it, the soil compacts, so that top layer of soil starts to get pushed out by lots of people walking on it. And the top layer of vegetation will then die out. So you might start to find some bits of grass disappearing. And then over time, more and more of the vegetation dies, and soil and rock become exposed, so you start to see the soil and the rocks underneath that grass, and that footpath will get wider and wider. And then eventually, because there are fewer particles holding the soil together, because the roots bind our soil together, so if there's no plants and no roots, the soil's not being held together, the wind will then blow over it and it will just take the soil away. And you'll find not only do we have this wide footpath, but it starts to get deeper because the top layer of soil gets taken away. So the second half of your sheet is this exam question. So this was an exam question, as I say, that came up a few years ago. And what I'd like to do is have a go at this question here, which is on the bottom half of your sheet. So what we've got is a transect of a footpath, and we can see some beautiful footpath erosion here. We can see where people have walked over the ground and they've worn down the grass, the vegetation, and then we've got this exposed rock underneath. So what I would like you to do, this transect on this diagram matches this. So X is X, Y is Y. What I would like to do in this box here, you need to put one of these 5 letters that best describes how this area of footpath has been destroyed. So pause your videos now and have a quick go at that. Hopefully you've all got beady eyes and realise there's actually 2 boxes you're meant to be filling in. So of our 2 boxes, this one over here we would say is E. So this is where our vegetation is largely unaffected because there are a few walkers here. So this edge of the path here, there's still quite a bit of vegetation because people obviously aren't walking across that bit. Whereas this central bit here, we would say is C. The most soil erosion is in the middle of the path where there are the most walkers. So people, we're all lazy, we know it, we walk the quickest route, we walk straight through that path. So that area is being walked over the most, which means that area is being worn down the most. So we've spoken about some of the positives of leisure in a rural area, and now we're going to think about why there are obviously some positives of it. It's not all doom and gloom. Now, when a rural honeypot site will start to form, we would say that in that local area there is something called a positive multiplier effect. And this is where a successful business or attraction results in nearby businesses benefiting and expanding. So for example, we're going to think about the New Forest. So within the New Forest, when that was made a national park and they built car parks and visitor centres to attract lots of people there, lots of the businesses in that surrounding area would also have benefited. So people who would go visit there might stop for lunch in a cafe. That cafe is then getting more business because of the honeypot site. People might camp overnight. The campsite is getting more businesses because of that honeypot site. If it wasn't a designated national park, if there wasn't a visitor centre and places to walk and see, those businesses probably wouldn't be doing that well. But because it is, they're getting more footfall and they're getting more income. So what I would like you to do next is pause your videos, copy out the key term, and then I want you to have a go at answering this question, which I have just answered for you. But I want you to put it into your own words and write it up as a sentence. So the question is, what businesses might benefit from a campsite in the New Forest? So if there was a campsite built in the New Forest, I know I mentioned campsite as an example earlier, but what positive multiplier effect will the campsite have on other surrounding businesses? Okay, so have a go at that question. Okay, so we're coming on to the last bit of the lesson now, and that's starting to have a think about how some of these rural honeypot sites are protected. So we actually have a range of different scales of protection in the UK, and I've mentioned a couple already. I've mentioned a national park, and I've mentioned an AONB, an area of outstanding natural beauty. So what I would like you to do is pause the video and copy down the types of management, okay? So types of management, and then I want you to see, you won't be able to for all of these, but you will for most of them. I want you to see if you're able to come up with an example, a local example of each of the different types of management. Okay, so hopefully you've come up with some of these. So SSSIs, Site of Special Scientific Interest. So these are sites that are really heavily protected because they might have a rare animal or a plant species there, or it might be an important geological site in terms of it might have fossils. So one very local to you guys is Wolstonbury Hill. That is an SSSI. Shore and Beach is also an SSSI. Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty and National Park, we'll come back to it in a second. Country parks, Seven Sisters Country Park, quite a big one near to us. And national nature reserves, there are loads of these all over the place. You've got some local to you, there's some in Hurst, some in Hassocks. So nature reserves are also protected. So as I mentioned, we're going to come back to an AONB because actually Mid-Sussex is a massive part of Mid-Sussex is an AONB. So just north of Haywards Heath, including Cutfield, all the way across to kind of the Bluebell Railway, Ashurst Wood, up to kind of East Grinstead Way, is an AONB, and it's called the High Weald AONB. So this whole area is a protected site, and whilst there are villages and towns built there, there are a lot of regulations about building in an AONB. And then in terms of a national park, we've obviously got quite a big one near to us. So national parks are parts of the UK which have got the most protection. And these are protected by the government in order to allow people to enjoy them. So they're actually all open places that the general public are able to visit whenever they want. But they're also protected to preserve particular wildlife. Now, national parks were set up after World War II as a result of feeling like people needed something to enjoy. And the first two were the Peak District and the Lake District. However, we've got a very local one to us, the South Downs National Park, which is the most recent national park. And that one was only formed in 2010, so it was only 10 years old, the South Downs National Park. Here's a map of all of them in the UK. So other one you might have been to is the New Forest, obviously not too far away from us. And overall, they cover 10% of England and Wales. So 10% of England and Wales are these protected national parks. So what I would like you to do now very quickly is just pause your videos, and I just want you to write out the definition of a national park for me. So as I mentioned, national parks have three main aims: to conserve and enhance the natural beauty, so to protect the natural beauty of an area, but to promote opportunities for public enjoyment. So to promote opportunities for us to go and enjoy them. So building car parks and visitor centres encourages people to come and use them. And then also to foster the economic and social well-being of communities living in the national park, because national parks do have villages in them. A lot of you are currently living in a national park. And one of the big aims is to make sure that these local communities do have a source of income. So encouraging there to be cafes set up and small businesses. So what I'd like you to do now is pause your videos, and I want you to summarise this information however you want. You can just write out the red bits if you want, or you can draw a series of little pictures to demonstrate it, but all under a heading of Aims of National Park. We're nearly there. You've done loads today, actually. This has been quite a long lesson, but the next two are a little bit shorter. So what we've got on the board now are two different maps. This first map shows you all of the national parks in the UK, and then this map shows you major cities. Now, if you look at both these maps, you can start to see that there is quite a clear link between them. So what I'd like you to do is choose a national park, any national park, and I want you to explain how it can be easily accessed by people in urban areas, because they're not just for people living in them. As we know, they're meant to promote people to come and enjoy them. So there'll be lots of people living in urban areas who are also able to come and visit these national parks, all right? So have a go at answering this question. So choose one and explain how it can be accessed. Okay, so obviously the one I'm going to choose is our one, the South Downs National Park on the south coast. And what we can say about the South Downs National Park, if you imagine it probably runs about here, is that the South Downs National Park is between three major settlements. It's between London, Brighton and Southampton, which means that there are three large urban areas where people are able to come and visit the national parks really easily. So from Brighton, you can get buses up to the national park. You don't need a car, but you obviously can drive. So there are a range of different ways that they can be accessible. So the last thing we're going to do is we're just going to have a go at planning an exam question together that kind of sums all this up. So the question is, to what extent is leisure in rural areas a good thing? So this is an 8-mark question, and you've started to have a look at these, but I'm going to talk you through how you would answer them. So whenever you have an 8-mark question, you will always start off with your overall judgment. So what percentage do you agree with this statement? So you could either say, I 80% agree with this statement, I think leisure in rural areas is a good thing, or you might say, I 80% disagree with this statement, I think leisure is a terrible thing in rural areas. And then what you have to do is explain why that is. So you might do one section which is explaining why leisure is good in rural areas, what opportunities does it bring, and then you would do another section that is why leisure is bad. So what I want you to do is make a copy of this plan, and I just want you to very briefly bullet point. So first of all, say whether you agree or disagree, then 1 or 2 bullet points for why leisure is good, 1 or 2 bullet points for why leisure is bad, and then I want you to have a go at summarising a little conclusion. So why did you think that? So if you said overall like 80% think leisure is bad, why? Why do you think it is more bad than good? And this is where you can start to talk about things like it being short-term or long-term, or whether you think environmental impacts are more significant than social impacts. So this is the last thing you're doing today. So pause your videos, make a quick copy of this table. This should only be taking you 2 minutes. You're not spending hours on this. You're not writing an 8-mark question. You are just making quick bullet points in it. Okay, so as we can see, very long lesson today. Lots of stuff you should have. So you should have leisure activities in the countryside, how leisure is good for your health, honeypot sites, key terms and questions, the honeypot site exam question, carrying capacity key terms, problems with leisure in rural areas, the footpath erosion sheet, the list and definitions of management, the national park aims and questions, and your 8-mark question plan. Well done, year 9. Loads of stuff there. All really interesting though, and I'm sure you've all done brilliantly. I will see you all very soon.